Today I want to give you 6 not so obvious tips from a property manager to a landlord. Over the past 16 years we've been in business, we have helped thousands upon thousands of landlords rent their property. So what I want to do is just share with you some of the practical advice that is not so obvious that you can take if you're renting your own house, and you can use it to your advantage. One of the ones that I think you need to be very aware of that's becoming more and more of a problem in the United States is really advertising safeguards. And what that means is you need to be aware that there are people out there that want to scam people out of their houses. There are people who want to take your rental property, if you're advertising it, they want to advertise it somewhere else for a lot less money and then collect the deposit and collect the rent and give someone keys to your property. So how do you safeguard against this? Well, if you're a landlord, one of the things that you need to do is to watermark all of your images. This is very, very important because it keeps people from screenshotting your images and using them somewhere else. The next thing you need to do is probably be very cautious about who you're showing the house to, how much information you're giving out. If you're going to show the house, walking through the house with them, taking all your application information, but just be very, very careful because there are people who want to move into the house, who want to scam people out of their house. And so this is a big one for you just to avoid. Another thing you might want to do besides watermarking your images, you may want to keep the exact address of the property to yourself and just advertise it and say, listen, we have a property in the Oak Mountain area and this property's for rent. You can come and see it, call me, email me if you would like to see this property, and then give a description about the property. So that's something you may want to do. You may want to avoid yard signs just to keep it, the privacy of the house is vacant, away from people who are driving around. It's completely up to you. I just really want you to be aware that there are people out there that do not have your best interest at heart, and they are looking to take your property and rent it to somebody else. And that gets to be a very, very difficult situation for a landlord. So that would be number one. Something else that I think is not very common knowledge is really just this whole upfront lease offer that some residents may want to give you. And this means that if a resident is very, very eager to get in your house, maybe they will offer 1 year's rent, like the upfront year's worth of rent. Typically, we don't think that's the best idea. Sometimes they may offer 6 months rent, 3 months rent. Maybe they're asking you to kind of forego some of the screening process, screening criteria. They may tell you that there's an emergency, that they have to get in this property, they need to get in this property. I think you should be very, very wary of that. This may mean that they, especially if they're asking you to kind of forego some of the background check, it may mean that they have been evicted. It may mean they have bad things on their record. Maybe they have a criminal record, maybe a felony or violent misdemeanors, anything that might prevent them from renting that house. And so just be aware when people are offering you upfront money, large sums of money, I would not do that. Just let them know that, hey, you're going to go through the entire process just like you do for everybody else, and stick to that process. Don't get tempted by the offer for upfront money. The next not so obvious landlord tip that I would give you is just to maintain thorough records. And what I mean by this is there's all kinds of records you need to maintain. That's income, expenses, but also think about this. When a resident is about to move into your property, you want to take record. You want to make sure that everything is documented in that house, how you give it to them. We're in a vacant property right now. This house is about to go on the market. This house is about to get leased, and we will come through and document everything so that when the resident moves out, we're going to be able to go and look at the property and then look at the images and say, this is exactly how we left it and this is how they gave it back. When you document everything, then it's very easy to make the decisions. Is this resident related damage or is this just normal wear and tear? That way you wouldn't charge the resident for that. If you don't have those documents and the resident stays in there 2 or 3 years, you're not going to really remember exactly how you gave it to the resident. So document everything, keep great records for your attorney. Just be very, very diligent. Now, some of you out there are probably a lot like me. You're not detail oriented, so this is going to be a struggle. And so you may want to find somebody that helps you do this, just is very meticulous about record keeping, very detail oriented. That may be a help, but I promise you it will benefit you in the long run. Another not so obvious tip that I would give landlords is just around resident screening. Now, you should always do the normal resident screening that you do for everybody. This is going to be credit check. This is going to be income verification. This is going to be criminal background check. You want to make sure they don't have any evictions or felonies or violent misdemeanors. But then if you want to go beyond that, you can do things like ask to meet them at their current rental property. And you can see exactly how they keep their rental property. You can look at their car. How do they keep their car? There's all kinds of things that you can do just to give you a better gut feeling, because if you have two great residents that are fully approved and you go to both of their houses and one keeps a very clean house and the other one, the house is in shambles, then you may want to give that property to the one that keeps the house in great condition, because it's a great indication of how they're going to take care of your house. That's probably just a little step further. If you're managing one rental property, you live in the area, that's something that you can do that would maybe help you make the right decision. The next not so obvious tip I would say is just a very thorough lease. I would avoid going on the internet and just pulling down a lease, a state specific lease. If you want to start there, that's okay, but then I would take it to an attorney, a real estate attorney, and make sure that everything that you want in that lease is in there and that you're safeguarded. It's fair for the resident, but obviously fair for you. I've seen a lot of landlords make the mistake of just putting together a very, very simple lease, and if it's not stated in the lease, then it's not really a great lease. As a matter of fact, I was just thinking about my niece, and the crazy thing is my niece rented her downstairs dwelling unit, an entire place, and she didn't even have a lease. I said, you know, what are you doing? You don't even have a lease. So number one, have a lease. And then number two, make sure it's checked by an attorney. It's very thorough. It's fair for the resident, fair for you, and it doesn't break any state-specific laws or anything like that. Just make sure that it's all buttoned up and perfect. And lastly, the not so obvious tip for landlords, I would say, is you need to have an effective communication strategy. It is not going to do you any good to lease your property and then ignore the resident, because they're gonna get frustrated. They're gonna move out in 12 months when the lease ends, and you're gonna have to turn that property. That's gonna cost money. There's vacancy costs, there's repair costs, and so you want to keep the resident in as long as you can. And one of the ways that you can do that is just effective communication, and make it very, very clear. If you don't want them having your cell phone, you don't have to give them your cell phone. You can give them an email and say everything that we do is done by email, just so you have records of that. If you want to give them your phone, you can do that. I've done that before. I wouldn't really advise it, but just make sure that you give them a good way to communicate so that you are on top of things. If they have an issue, you can resolve it. If they have questions, you can answer them. It's going to build a great relationship. Honestly, the resident doesn't want to get in touch with you a whole bunch. They really want to live their life unless there's an issue they want you to deal with. And so make sure you have an effective communication strategy. So those are the 6 not so obvious landlord tips from an experienced property manager that we wanted to give you. If there's anything that we can do for you at Evernest, please reach out. You can email us at sales@evernest.co. We would love to help you manage your rental house.